Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 230 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 4 of A Feast for Crows. That's Brienne 1. I felt like I sounded very English when I said George Martin there.
You did. I was saying the same thing. I was like, wow, you really played up the English accent there.
But that's not even my accent. That's some other part of England I was doing.
George Martin.
George Martin?
Well, anyway, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you unless you're on the spoiler tier. And hopefully we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and other things in this chapter. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. I just saw the witty banter. I'm sure that was very exciting for you.
Yes, we're recording the day. We're recording the day after Super Tuesday in the United States, which is during the primaries, which most people don't have primaries because it's a weird thing. You vote for the candidate you want to stand as the candidate in the general election, which is very strange. But I got to vote, and it's a whole novelty for me voting because it's been such a long time while I've been disenfranchised. But here I am just voting, and of course they look at me when I go into the voting thing, and I'm wearing a bowler hat and a monocle and waving an umbrella.
Is it George Martin?
My name's George Martin. Like to vote, please.
I got George Martin's not on this ballot.
So yeah, they look at my ID awfully carefully. This does not seem legit, my friend.
Well, that's very cool. Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, at least at the presidential level, my vote made very little difference. Both of the presidential primaries were rather processions by this point, it felt like.
Yes, they were. Yes. This is the last election that Molly won't be able to vote in because she'll be 18 come November.
Crazy.
Which is
crazy
to think about.
Carson has actually basically become a three-headed hydra of votes because, especially on the primary, me and Lucas were like, who are we supposed to vote for? And she gave us both a piece of paper and sent us on our way.
Oh. A three-pronged attack.
Exactly. I was like, oh, she's done the work for me. I'll vote for who she said.
Yeah, right. Yeah, speaking of Molly turning 18, her high school swim banquet was on Monday, and it wasn't
just
even
1 second. Can I just interject, please? Can I just interject? How many school leaving ceremonies is your child going to have?
I don't know. They just keep coming. I thought I'd be ready for this one. I was sitting at a table with Stacy and friends of ours, and she gets up. So it's the swim banquet. All of the kids from freshmen through seniors are there, but the seniors get up and they say some words, and they say goodbye basically. And I was totally unprepared for the fact that I started to get a little teary while she was up there. Stacy's like, "Are you crying?" I was like, "No." No, I'm not crying. I got something in my left eye here is all.
Oh, Mackelly.
I was like, hold it together, weirdo. Just knock it off. All she's doing is... I was starting to tear up when other kids were thanking their parents. Yeah. I was like, I don't even know that kid. Why am I tearing up for that one? I'm a teary kind of person. I
am too in certain situations, but I just haven't met those situations yet. That's all.
It's just
theoretically,
right? Theoretically, they're out there.
So the other interesting thing that's happened to me this week was I went to a new friend's house, friend of a friend who's become a friend, to play board games. And we had a great time playing board games, and they were very hospitable hosts, and I really enjoyed it. They had a really nice board game table. And for a long time, I've had a little bit of a soft spot for the idea of a board game table, which
I bet.
is incommensurate both with my budget and also the size of my house. But their board game table was also their dining table. It was very, very nice piece of furniture, and basically, so it's sunken in like a pool table or a billiard table. It was got with sort of like cushions, and then it had magnetic racks on both the inside and outside where you could slot cup holders and token holders as well for board games.
Okay.
And so the whole thing was really cool. And then it had solid wood blocks that you could put over the top to then have it as a real table, you see.
Right. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Multi-purpose.
And it was very, very nice indeed. And I got the brand, and I was like, I'm going to go and look at that. And me and Carson, maybe I'm going to ask for this for my birthday. Thinking it might be, it was nice. So I thought it might be like $1,500, which is a crazy amount of money that I would probably never spend on a board game table. But at the same time, I was kind of excited by this thing. When I got home, they started at $10,500.
What? For a board game table? Wow, it must be. But you said it was a nice piece of furniture, though.
It was lovely. I mean, if it was covered over and you didn't know it was a board game table, you'd just think it was a very pretty, although quite bulky, dining table.
Right. Oh my goodness. That I'm guessing you were caught off guard by that.
Yeah, I didn't bother asking Carson about my birthday.
Okay, so that was a really high-end one. But might there be a lower end?
I did find in my searching, which spanned a broader spectrum of board game tables than just that one, let me tell you.
I bet. Yes.
I found an inflatable cover that you could put on your table that had some cup holders.
Okay.
And it had sort of like bumpers to catch the dice so they didn't roll off the table. And that was like $100. And I was like...
There you go. Now that fits in the budget pretty nicely.
Yeah.
When you said inflatable, I was picturing like one of those inflatable pools that little kids play.
A little bit like that. I mean, basically, so when it... Actually, I don't think it was inflatable, to be fair. It just... It looked like it was kind of like it looked like a kid's paddling pool is what it basically looked like. Right. But it was the size of a table, and you put it on there, and it had sort of like built-up cushions, a flat surface, and cup holders. So, yeah.
Okay.
It would have worked.
That could work.
Yeah. And with the $10,300 change that I haven't spent, I could, pay my mortgage and stuff.
Right. Yeah, something responsible like that.
All right, let us get down to business. How did we leave Brienne of Tarth? So last we saw of Brienne, she was being issued with a brand new Valyrian steel sword by Jaime Lannister. He wants her to call it Oathkeeper and to use it to do all she can to find and return Sansa Stark to the north. He assumes that Arya is dead, confirming that the girl being shipped north is an imposter. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
All right. Well, Brienne is on the road. She's exhausted any lead she can think of in King's Landing and is now headed north toward Duskendale, more in hope than expectation. It's not exactly a lead, but Dantas Hollard is also missing since Joffrey's death, and he hails from nearby. Maybe he took her home?
While in Rosby, she questions everyone she comes across, from a grey-haired goodwife, a blacksmith, to castle guards, and just misses questioning a boy on a piebald horse. To each the question is the same. Have you seen a beautiful, high-born maid of 3 and 10 with blue eyes and auburn hair, possibly travelling with a portly knight or a fool? I particularly like that, by the way, that it could be one or the other, depending on how you view him. Yes. Or is it two guys, To explain her reason for the question, she claims that the missing girl is her sister. Nobody has seen a pair matching that description.
Again on the road after her brief stop in Rosby, she ponders the fruitlessness of her rescue effort. Sansa could be anywhere in the known world. If it were Brienne in Sansa's shoes, she'd return to her father in Tarth. However, Sansa's lost both her parents and her siblings, and even Winterfell had been sacked and the path north blocked by the Ironborn at Moat Cailin.
Her fellow travellers along the road provide no more fruit than those in Rosby. She considers the possibility that Sansa is dead and Jaime sent her on a quest as a cruel jape, but discounts the idea. He was too earnest, and plus he gave her his Valyrian sword and named it Oathkeeper. As night approaches, Brienne comes across a pair of hedge knights grilling trout. The younger man offers her a portion of their meal, mistaking her for a knight. When she removed her helmet, he discovered his error and quickly corrected it.
They haven't seen Sansa or Dantos, but determining that she could take them if need be, she agrees to their meal. Sir Creighton Longbow is loquacious in sharing his exploits during the Battle of the Blackwater. Sir Illifer the Penniless is as taciturn as Longbow is vociferous. Creighton insists Brienne allow them to escort her to Duskendale. When she declines, Illifer says the likes of her don't need the likes of them. When pressed, he announces her as the Maid of Tarth who opened Renly's throat.
Brienne thinks of how kind Renly was to her when he travelled to Tarth during his lord's progress for his coming of age, how he made the awkward, self-conscious young girl feel special. From that day forward, she only wanted to be near him and protect him. However, she knew that these men wouldn't understand. In response, she said only, "I would have given my life for King Renly and died happy." She then swore oaths to every god of the seven, including the stranger, that she was innocent.
That's good enough for the men. The next morning, the three discussed their watches of the night. Brienne and Illifer saw nobody, but Creighton saw only a lone boy on a horse and scared off some rough-looking men on foot. The two knights fell in on each side of her, as knights would a great lady. Around midday, they heard chanting before a large group of ragged men, women, and children emerged into view.
Calling themselves the Sparrows, they headed to King's Landing to bring the bones of dead Septons, Scepters, and Silent Sisters to the Sept of Baelor, and then planning to receive protection from King Tommen. They asked Brienne and her companions to come to King's Landing with them, as all should drop what they're doing to defend the faith. When the companions decline, the Sparrows move on.
Later in the day, the companions come upon a merchant and his men, guarded by a diminutive knight named Sir Sadrich, a.k.a. the Mad Mouse. The men haven't seen Brienne's sister or her hedge knight fool travel partner. The two groups agree to travel together for a time. As they travel, Sadrich rides alongside Brienne and tells her she's not the only hunter in the woods. He too is looking for Sansa Stark, in hopes of cashing in on the spider's reward. Brienne feigns ignorance, but the knight's not fooled.
They stop for the night at an inn. Brienne pays for rooms and food for her two companions, as she's flushed with coin thanks to Jaime. While the rest sleep, Brienne sneaks out of the inn and rides off towards Duskendale. She says a silent apology to Creighton and Illifer, but she must keep going. She has a promise to keep to Jaime. She failed Renly and Catelyn. She will not let that happen again. She will not rest until she's found Sansa Stark.
That could be a problem.
She's
not going to rest.
It's going to be a long night.
She's going to be dragging. Just the first thing I wanted to mention real quick is she's got this description of Sansa that you read in the summary. 13 years old, beautiful auburn hair, blue eyes. But in reality, she's never actually seen Sansa. So she could possibly be fooled by a fake Sansa. If someone took the bait and said, looked enough the part and decided, I'll be who you're looking for if it's something good, she might fall prey to something like that.
Yes, I'm envisioning a family with a teenage auburn-haired, blue-eyed girl who's giving them a bit of lip. Saying...
Yes. That description fits for given lip. Teenage girl. I've got one.
All right. This is Sansa Stark. You can have her. Brienne arrives back in King's Landing with like 8 of them on tow behind her. The one thing I'll say is that Brienne does have a little bit of an insight into what Sansa looks like, because she did know Catelyn, and everyone has said, Peter Baelish in particular has said how much they resemble one another. So there is that. There should at least be a family likeness to Catelyn.
Yes, that is very true. Of course, if Jane Poole can be believed as Arya, then... Yeah. But the difference, of course, is that Jane grew up in Winterfell and knew the Starks. And so she might be able to answer some family history questions.
And she's trying to be a person who was a very small girl the last time anybody in the North laid eyes on her. Yes, so it's not going to be very difficult to fool those people, especially if they're willing to be fooled,
Good distinction. Yes, that's true.
So Brienne's starting her search by making her way to Duskendale. the reasons for that are not great. I mean, if you were literally going to search the whole of the Seven Kingdoms, Westeros and Essos for this child, you'd wish you had a bigger first clue. But the clue she's got is that she went missing the night Joffrey died, as did Sir Dontus Hollard. Okay, that's not much of a clue, right? I mean, that's just two people going missing the same night. Joffrey went missing that night in some ways. But in actual fact, there is another intersection, of course, which is her saving Sir Dontus from Joffrey's wrath. And people would remember that and then piece that back together and say, you know what, those two might be in cahoots. And then the reason for Duskendale is that Sir Dontus is from a castle just outside of Duskendale. In fact, that's where House Hollard was based. It's just outside of Duskendale.
Yes. Of course, he grew up in King's Landing. So even the fact that she's starting in Duskendale is pretty weak. It's grasping at straws. Now, there's also the fact that the King's Landing port is still struggling to reopen after the Battle of the Blackwater, and that the port at Duskendale is much more active. And Brienne figures, because the Ironborn have Moat Cailin locked down, and therefore the North locked down, if Sansa did decide she wanted to try and get back to the North anyway, she'd have to go by boat. So, that's a little bit of an extra bonus for heading to Duskendale.
That's true. That's true. It does feel like a hopeless task, basically, for Brienne. I will say, I'm going to say this now, and then later in the discussion, I'm going to say why there's reason for hope. But basically, it feels like a hopeless task. Because Sansa, whilst a fairly striking needle, she is in a Westeros-sized haystack. That is a big old haystack with lots of auburn-haired needles in it. And Brienne actually wonders if Jaime might have sent her on this quest as a Jake, but she discards the idea with Jaime wouldn't do that to me. And I think she's right. I think new Jaime wouldn't. Old Jaime would do that in a heartbeat to anyone.
Yes. I think it's an example of how huge of a departure their current relationship is from the original relationship when the two of them met at the beginning of Storm of Swords. I mean, he was actively trying to kill her then,
right?
So that in and of its own is a big departure. But at the end of the chapter, she thinks that she failed Renly and she failed Cat Stark, but she is not going to fail Jaime. He trusted me with his sword and his honor, and that's a big.
So,
big
question for you: Is it just a change in Jaime and Brienne's relationship, or is it a fundamental change in Jaime?
I think there's some of both there.
Right.
I think the fundamental change in Jaime has a lot to do with the fundamental change in their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's symbiotic. It goes both ways. Because of their relationship, I think Jaime is at least slightly better person than he was before.
Yeah.
And I think because he's a better person than he was before, they have this newfound relationship.
I know this is not a Jaime chapter, but now we're talking about him. What catalyzed this? Was it just the loss of his hand? I mean, was all his bad humor in his right hand, and now he's lost it? He's actually kind of a nice guy,
Right? Yeah, it was his right hand was toxic. Well, in some ways, maybe there was a hubris there with his skill as a swordsman in losing that. So in some ways, his hubris could have been considered toxic.
Yeah. So. That. I really like what you just said.
But you're right, though. I mean, it is in a lot of ways. I mean, Sansa could literally be anywhere in the known world.
Yes. Yes. If he was doing it for a joke, it would be very similar.
Yes. She doesn't have any way to return home, no family to reunite with, can't even get north if she wanted to. It's like you said, she's a striking needle, but still a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. The only difference if this was a joke is when she pulls Oathkeeper out, it would flop over like made of foam.
Yes, right.
Otherwise, not a joke.
I wondered, should she have at all considered Castle Black as a possible first destination for Sansa if she was on the lam?
I don't know if that's a spoiler you're getting at, but I believe that is what she thinks in Game of Thrones, in the TV show.
Oh, I was just asking that question.
Yeah, I think in the TV show that was her first thought. Again, casting guesses to the wind, because who knows?
Right. Yeah, but she thinks she's got no family, but that's not entirely true. She has a bastard brother.
And that was the justification in the TV show. She's like, well, the one person I know she's still got is at Castle Black, so let's try there. Let's go the furthest distance we can.
Yes. Forget Duskendale.
Yeah.
We're going all the way.
I like
Castle
Duskendale
Black.
First, Castle Black second.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, through this chapter anyway, she has not considered making it to Castle Black yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe you're just hypothesizing a sensible next step.
Yeah.
But I will say, when she meets Sir Shadrich at the end, he makes me think that Sansa might get found. If there's enough Sir Shadriches around in the realm looking for this girl, they'll find her eventually.
Yeah, I mean, we know, Shadrich tells us that Varys was offering a purse as reward for finding her. So,
as word of that spreads...
Yeah, right. Hedge knights are going to be out there.
Yeah, and eventually one of them's going to, well, let's say she stays in the Vale. One of them's going to go to the Vale and spot her and be like, there, with Peter Baelish. Peter Baelish.
Auburn hair.
Yeah, who was fostered at Riverrun as a child. How about that? Maybe I'll mention this to Varys next time I see him.
But wait, her name's Elaine Stone, so that couldn't be her.
Couldn't be her. Yeah. But then that got me thinking, maybe Brienne's best bet is not this sort of like lone wolf approach that she's taking. No, I'm looking for a different blue-eyed, auburn-haired 13-year-old than you are. But instead...
Traveling with a full or
yes, but actually to make common cause with them and say, look, don't take her to Varys, bring her to me. I'll match his price, but I want her. Tell everyone you meet, I'm the one.
As you say that, it reminded me, she's carrying that letter from Tommen that says, this is Brienne of Tarth. She's on official business of the king. She could say, you find her, bring her to me, I will get you paid.
As I recall, that document is slightly undermined by the childish signature of the king.
Yes, it was.
Which is very unfortunate. Of course, I guess most people she showed it to wouldn't be able to read anyway. So they wouldn't notice the bad handwriting. But if she says, yeah, that's good. I mean, that gives her some clout for this. And then, but then she's got to outbid Varys. That's the only thing she can do.
Yes.
See this Valyrian steel sword? You can. I did flopping motion for the listeners.
Flopping sword.
You can have this in return for Sansa Stark. That would be a good deal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good point. Yeah,
Varys can't match that.
I mean, she's working for Jaime, so you would think that Jaime would be able to outbid Varys.
True enough. Huh. Yeah, I think we've solved it. She can actually go back to King's Landing and put her feet up.
Right.
Wait for it to come.
Just wait for reel in the big fish.
Yeah, wait for the chain gangs of auburn-haired teenagers to be dragged back to King's Landing. No.
Yep.
Take them back. Still troubling to me what she'd actually do if she found her, if she did rescue her. Because who would want her? I mean, she can't really... I mean, she might flee to Castle Black, but it's not a long-term solution for her. She won't be welcome there in normal times, and it's not normal times up there.
Right. It's a tough position.
Yeah,
definitely.
But the one thing about this is it's going to take some time to find her. Again, you've got a big haystack to go through. Maybe the answer to this question will resolve itself. Maybe
true.
Rickon will have claimed the North by the time they find.
Yes. That's what's coming for sure.
Yeah. I did really like Illifer the Penniless and Creighton Longbow. We didn't give them much in the summary because mostly they're sort of comic relief, sort of like
Right.
Creighton's braggadocio and Illifer's sort of silence over everything is, but they're very classic Shakespeare. I don't know if you know much Shakespeare, but they kind of remind me of Falstaff from Henry V, or maybe Dogberry from Much Ado About Nothing, or even the Gravediggers from Hamlet. They have that sort of like this is serious business, but let's have a couple of funny characters along to make it just to leaven it slightly.
Definitely. Yeah, they appear to be decent men, if prone to embellishing the stories of their feats, or at least Creighton was.
Yeah.
They did offer the trout out of the blue and kept an eye on her while she slept. Yeah. That's all decent things.
Yeah, I think that she's quite terrifying, probably helps her in that respect,
That was her decision. That was the decision. It was that fact that she thought, if I can't take these two, I might as well trade in my sword for knitting needles.
How does Illifer figure out she's Brienne of Tarth?
Yeah, so it starts with... So she's carrying this Lothston shield, which is a bat on silver and gold. And Illifer recognizes the sigil, even though the house has been extinct for a long time. And he says only a person who is hiding their identity would carry such a shield of such...
infamy, shame.
Yes, a shame. That's what it was. It was shame. Unless your shame is greater and fresher than the shame of the Lothstons. And then that's when he says, we're in the presence of Brienne of Tarth, who opened Renly's throat.
Yeah, which is all... Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's always going to be... She is physically recognizable. If anyone's ever met her before, you'd be like, oh, that's Brienne of Tarth,
Yeah, the hound suffers from the same situation. It's hard to be incognito if you're either of those two.
Right, yeah. And everyone is going to believe that she did it, because that was the story that came out of Renly's camp, that she did it and she fled.
Yeah, I'm thinking... this seems to be spreading. I mean, these are two hedge knights here in the Crownlands, and they're familiar with the story. So I'm wondering if possibly it's even spread to Tarth, and her father has been told this rumor. But, as I say, the fact that even these random hedge knights in the Crownlands have heard this rumor, knowledge of the story could point to them actually having fought in the Battle of the Blackwater, which everyone thinks he's lying about, because his stories are so outlandish.
But do we have any sense of which side they were fighting on, from who they've killed?
We'll find out in background that the knight with the red rooster is a very, very slight chance that he could have been from the Stormlands, which means
they were probably fighting for the Lannisters.
Yes, it would mean they were fighting for the Lannisters.
Well, that's interesting, because the reason I was drilling into that is because if they were fighting on Renly's side, or Stannis' side, I guess, then they would be more likely to have heard the camp whispers about who killed Renly.
Yes, you would think that if you were fighting from Renly or Stannis' camp, you would certainly have heard about it, versus the other side of the...
Right.
But of course, a lot of the people from Renly's camp, at least from the Reach, came over to the Lannister side. So things got a little bit muddled there.
Yeah. True.
I wondered, though, is Creighton a compulsive liar, or does he have some issue which compels him to tell outlandish tales about himself? Everyone seemed to think he was lying, but he would not stop. At one point, she thinks that he has told her about a dozen different people that he killed in the Battle of Blackwater. And then Sir Shadrich, who actually did fight in the Battle of Blackwater, said, yeah, he wasn't there.
Yeah, I've known people like that who were compulsive BSers.
Just want to tell you stories that didn't actually happen.
Yeah. I had a friend at college who told me he had a line in his head that he'd obviously latched onto, that he really wanted to say this line, and he told me 3 different stories leading to the same punchline. And it was a good punchline and a good story, and so I remembered it. So a month later when he told me a completely different story leading to the same punchline, I was like, something doesn't ring true here.
Did it happen to him again, but only in a different way this time?
Perhaps, yeah.
But the thing about Sir Creighton is he doesn't seem to lie about other things that we can tell, unless, here's a thought that I had earlier today. What if Creighton and Illifer weren't actually hedge knights? They just found these, this gear, and were like, hey, let's pretend to be hedge knights. And Sir Creighton is just making up stories left and right to make it sound more believable.
Would Illifer therefore have recognised the sigil of House Lothston?
That's a good point, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe he was from that area, from the Harrenhal area.
I feel like there's a kernel of truth in the things that he says. I think they were at the Battle of Blackwater, but he exaggerates his own abilities considerably.
I agree.
That's my
guess.
I agree. So we get the backstory of why Renly meant so much to Brienne. He came to Tarth when in his coming of age progress, and he was very sweet to her. She was young. She was 12, did she say, or younger than that?
Yeah, I don't remember specifically what age she said.
But she was already sort of plain, but he made her feel very special. He sat her on her knee and told her stories, made her giggle. And that's kind of, you feel like that's how Renly would be, He would be sort of like, I think Renly liked to be loved. So finding a shy girl to make her happy would make him happy too, That this led to her undying fealty to him does feel a little bit sad. That's all it took.
One person showing her a bit of attention. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, there's a sort of ugly duckling aspect to it as well. That she, what Renly should have done was showed her that she actually, she herself was becoming something. She didn't need Renly's approval to become a person of worth just because he was the first person to be nice to you.
Right.
I don't know. It just made me a bit sad.
There's she's remembering this, meeting Renly and the lead up to meeting Renly, and she told her father she didn't want to go down to the feast. She just wanted to stay in her room, and her father insisted that she attend, and she recalls telling him, they'll know about the rose and laugh at me. And I'm only bringing that up because we're going to discuss that shortly here, the rose, in spoilers.
Okay.
The rest of you will find out in time what that's in reference to. But
I'm excited because I remember her saying it and going, the heck's she talking about? Perhaps like Renly, I was completely in the dark.
She thinks about Tyrion that if half the stories are true about him, he's the cruelest of all the Lannisters. And I thought, that seems odd that she would have that much of a wrong opinion about Tyrion, only because she spent so much time with Jaime, who was
Tyrion.
One of the few people in the realm who loved him so much. And she's grown to respect and trust Jaime. So you would think that Jaime would have mentioned on their, at least the ending half of their ride when they were much more copacetic with each other, about his brother Tyrion and dispelled some of those rumors, mentioned things he likes or loves about him.
Let me turn this one back around on you a little bit, though. Imagine you're Brienne and I'm Jaime, and I start telling you about how fantastic my twin sister is. You would have put your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 la.
Yeah, that's true.
It's different, but it might have had the same kind of effect. She might have just ignored him when he was talking about his siblings.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. So they meet this group of sparrows, this flock, bringing a wagon full of bones of septons, scepters, and silent sisters to the Sept of Baelor, just to test me on the tongue twister. They're hoping
you did well.
Thank you. They're hoping to find succor and protection from the king when they get there. Go on, talk to me.
I worry that they might not receive the expected reception with Cersei in charge. If Tywin were still in charge, they might he might recognize the importance of keeping the faith happy and, pay some token respect. I'm not sure that Cersei has the similar foresight and concern about even putting on pretenses to show respect to, the offer and request.
Just theorizing that and perhaps undermining the Tywin as a good guy narrative that you just put forward. The direction they're coming from, it's almost certainly someone under Tywin's direct command who killed those people.
Almost certainly, yes.
Maybe Roose Bolton, but he was also an ally,
Yes.
Maybe
yes,
Vargo Holt, but also...
I'm just thinking, not so much him being a nice guy, but that he is smart enough and capable enough as a leader to think, I got to keep the faith happy. So just, let them do their thing. Tell them we're sorry. Tell them thank you and you're blessed and all that.
That
and
Vargo Holt.
Right, yeah. Whoever brought him over, I tell you what. Now, if only this group shows up, maybe it's not that big a deal. But the Septon sounded like he was trying to build a groundswell,
right,
including all anointed knights is what he specifically said to them. So it could be a larger group than this. There were, I would think, around maybe 70 to 80 people in this group here. There were 70 of men, women, and children, and then also some begging brothers. They didn't say how many begging brothers. The score is 20, right? So
yeah. Maybe
there were 10 begging brothers, make it 70. Or
that's a sizable group.
Yeah. He mentions the leader of this Sparrow group mentions Seps having been despoiled, and we were with Arya with the band of brothers when they rescued such a Sept from the brave companions, as you mentioned, Vargo Hoat just a minute ago. Yeah. And then she tells Illifer and Creighton that she saw a Septon being used, strung up from a tree and being used as target practice. And I'm pretty sure that was when the brave companions brought Jaime to Vargo Hoat and he had his hand lopped off. I think that was that same scene, if I'm remembering properly.
Can't really bail you out, but yeah, it's plausible.
In my mind, that was what was happening anyway.
I was reading that a lot of readers think that Feast for Crows is too slow and meandering, and that Brienne's chapters are actually the worst culprits there. Something for us to look forward to. But
yes.
I did then see a counterpoint to that, which someone was saying that they thought it was the Brienne chapters in Feast for Crows were George Martin's best writing. That he actually...
Oh.
So we shall keep an eye on this and discuss as we go.
There's very different opinions.
Yes,
there.
yes. I think... Everyone agreed that they were a little bit meandery, but
right.
the positive slant was he was taking his time and really doing a great job of the writing. So we shall cast our critical eye across it.
Right. Yeah, quests can be meandering at times.
Absolutely.
A lot of dead ends and wrong turns.
Yeah. So partly because I know where Brienne's story is headed. No. I vaguely remember. I was wondering about literary parallels to her, because this book is so huge. I mean, the whole series is so enormous that you have got many different literary sort of devices running through it. And the word that occurred to me was Bildungsroman. And I didn't really know what Bildungsroman meant because I'm not actually a literary critic. It's a journey for the main character where they mature, usually going through some very dark places on the way. They come out the other end matured and, sort of learned lessons from their experience kind of thing. And I thought it... So Tom Sawyer is an example. Harry Potter's an example. Holden Caulfield is one as well. But then when I read that, I started to think, well, actually, I'm applying it to the wrong person. It's more Arya, if anybody, and possibly Sansa, depending on where Sansa's story goes. I don't want to spoil that. But they're both in that position to go through that. I was here, and now in my formative years, I'm going to be dragged through horrors, and I'm going to come out the other end of it a different person, and perhaps I will certainly be shaped by what I experienced, but also be perhaps made by what I experienced.
Yeah, definitely. I think Sansa, I mean, yeah, like you said, we don't know where her story is going yet, but she started out as a naive, just a girl who loves songs and knitting, and has gone through some really tough things. And we'll see if she comes out on the other end, and if so, how she comes out.
Yeah, in the classic Bildungsroman, you come out the other end, coming to terms, reaching some peace with your journey. Fingers crossed for Arya and Sansa.
Right. Yeah. Well, this chapter. So on the A Song of Ice and Fire book face group page, there is a discussion about the top 5 fighters in the main story, not including Fire and Blood and like historical fighters, but in the Song of Ice and Fire story. And when I read this chapter, I noticed something that Brienne said, and I think she gave us her take on at least one of the fighters of the realm.
Is it Sir Illifer?
It is, yes. Oh, it's Creighton, clearly.
Creighton, yes. Yeah. Sorry, Creighton. Easily.
Brienne thinks of Jaime fighting her in chains while weak from imprisonment. And she thinks it was all she could do to keep him at bay. And that no man in the 7, it might have been knight, no knight or man or someone in the 7 kingdoms could have stood up to him in his full strength with use of both hands. Now, of course, nobody has to worry about that anymore. But the reason I say this is I was surprised at how many people's lists didn't have Jaime on it. Now, many did. Some had him as number 1. Maybe they remember this line from this chapter. But, based on the thought she provides to us in this chapter, I think she would have him top of the list.
Is it all sort of contemporary? Is it now?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, if it's now, Jaime's off the list because he's not going to be the greatest fighter.
Two-handed Jaime was...
because, for instance, I think Jaime would defeat Barristan Selmy now.
Now, right. Yes.
Again, meaning before he lost his hand. But there was a time when Barristan Selmy, I think, was the better fighter than Jaime.
Yes. If you took them both in their prime...
Right, then
maybe it would have been
Selmy.
Battle. Yeah, some of the other people who I noticed on various lists, Selmy obviously was on there. Oberyn Martell, Syrio Forel was listed on there.
Our old friend.
Yes, that's right. Our personal friend. The Great John was on there, and the person who put him on his or her list said that the reason he was on there is because it took him getting absolutely drunk and then 8 men to try and subdue him. So he deserves to be on the list.
The one who I think should definitely be on the list is the Mountain.
Oh, yes. He was on some lists, as was the Hound.
See, the Hound has a weakness.
Yes, right.
The Mountain, I don't know. I always remember when Zdeno Chara played hockey for the Boston Bruins?
I do.
I never saw him fight anyone. But he was a monster. I mean, he was a gargantuan human being.
Yes, he was.
And I remember a commentator saying he's the most feared man in the NHL. And I remember thinking, I've never seen him fight anyone. And then I was like, oh, that maybe makes sense.
Yes,
now I'm saying it.
Nobody was dumb enough.
Your Syrio Forels and your Jaimes and they're not fighting the Mountain. They're not stupid.
Only Oberyn Martell decided to tackle that one.
And he did lose despite poisoning him repeatedly.
Right. But yeah, it came up this week right as we were reading that chapter, that discussion. And I was like, oh, well, Brienne has a take. Jaime would be top of her list, I think.
Yes. So there is a known character who came up in sort of a cameo in this chapter, but we didn't see that person revealed, so we're going to have to wait until we find out who it is, except our upper tier members of our Buy Me a Coffee sustainers are going to hear about it in a few seconds because we're going to do spoilers. We'll be back with the rest of you soon. All right, how about some background?
Okay. Good old Sir Creighton Longbow can't stop talking about his triumphs during the Battle of the Blackwater. Of the dozen men he claims to have slain, he speaks most about a knight with a red chicken sigil. Now, I mentioned this earlier, that I couldn't find any such sigil ever brought up. There is no mention of a red chicken sigil. The closest I could find is House Hurston of the Stormlands. They have a yellow chicken on a red and white field. Now, bastards are known to make a play on their parents' house's sigil at times, so possibly he could have been a bastard of House Hurston, or just a hedge knight with no house or seat to speak of, or totally fabricated and just an idea that Sir Creighton had, or just totally fabricated.
I mean, with Sir Creighton, totally fabricated, absolutely true. They're pretty much the same thing.
That's right.
So close.
And Sir Illifer, when he first met Brienne, he was rather weary of her because she carried the shield of the House Lothston sigil, which I mentioned earlier was black bat on silver and gold. And he figures the only reason anyone would brandish the sigil, so associated with dark deeds, is if their own deeds were darker and fresher. And of course, he was referring to her murdering Renly. So who are these Lothstons? Well, we've talked about them a couple times in the past, about how the original Lord Lucas Lothston became Lord of Harrenhal and his association with the Targaryens. Now, here's where it gets really muddy. It's unclear if the Lucas that Sir Illifer references is the same man. We know that the original Lord Lucas had a daughter named Jane, but the Lord Lucas that Illifer mentions had a son named Manfred and the nickname the Pander. So I think we're dealing with two different Lord Lucas Lothstons. And just to add a little more complication to the matter, there's also possibly two Manfred Lothstons. The one mentioned in this chapter is the son of Lucas, the Pander, and his nickname was Manfred o' the Black Hood. His name was spelled F-R-Y-D. The other is spelled F-R-E-D.
Yep.
And all I know about the F-R-E-D Manfred is that he betrayed Daemon Blackfyre during the first Blackfyre Rebellion. I'm not sure that's enough of a dark deed to land so high up on Sir Illifer's naughty list.
Right.
And just to finish things off with our knights that we meet in this chapter, Sir Shadrich says that he's from Shady Glen. I could find absolutely no info on Shady Glen, just like the Knight of the Red Chicken.
So what you're saying is, of the three knights, only one of them tells a reliable story, basically.
That might be what I'm saying, yes.
All right, so in comparison with the television show, Brienne leaves King's Landing in the company of another character, which is a spoiler for what's to come, so I'm not going to mention it. Not much of what we see here happens, but watching Brienne's scenes back, I'm not sure that I made this point at the time, but some of Loras's ire towards Brienne is given over to Marjorie. You remember in the book, Loras was the one who was angry at Brienne.
Yes.
It doesn't make an awful lot of sense, that change, really, because Loras and Renly were the lovers, and Loras witnessed the crime. Marjorie didn't.
Right.
So he's always going to be the one who's going to be more angry. Possibly just an excuse to get more Diana Rigg and Natalie Dormer back on screen. I can kind of understand that, but as I watched these Brienne scenes again, I was like, I don't think I made that point. But this whole chapter didn't really happen in the show at all.
Okay, I figured that might be the case.
Yeah, Pedantry Corner. I think I might be getting too nice, but you have something.
It's very minor. I don't know that I'd call it pedantry, but from my personal experience. Now, surely beds were built different in Westeros, but
true.
In my
but
household,
you, like Brienne, are tall.
We have a king bed that Stacy and our 10-pound dog Penny and I sleep on, and the three of us have trouble fitting in our king bed. So either this bed, which she describes as being made to sleep 6 people, was too short for her to sleep without having... She had to lay diagonally because it was too short for her to sleep in the normal position. And so either the bed made for 6, they're all really supposed to cram in there and spoon, or it has to be wider than it is long. And she could have just turned the, in the width direction versus the length direction. I can see what you're saying. But if the bed has a headboard, right?
Yeah. You'd want your head near the headboard. So you'd choose diagonal over crosswards.
I guess so, yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I just thought...
Legit. Legit.
Wide enough to fit 6 people feels like a really wide bed, is all I'm saying.
All right, news and notes. HBO have announced the premiere time frame for House of the Dragon Season 2. June of 2024? Not so very far away.
Yes, and you and I have been in discussions of some things we might do come House of the Dragon Season 2 time.
Yep, looking forward to those.
Also, we won't have a new episode going out the week of April 1st. No, it is not an April Fool's prank that week when you don't get your new episode. We both have things going on, so not even a guest host will save us this time.
I will say, at current rate of progress, we could do an outtake episode. We are racking them up at the moment.
Most of them aren't that funny, though.
That's true.
They're just me saying Longborough instead of Longbow.
All right, we have a new Buy Me a Coffee sustainer. Katura S has joined at the landed night level, so hopefully Katura is enjoying the perks of that level, such as are always entertaining, at least to us, wildfire side chats.
Yes, to us. Hopefully to everyone else, but at least to us, we know they're entertaining. And we got a review on Apple Podcasts. Larissa. And Larissa's subject line says, Best A Song of Ice and Fire podcast ever. Ever in all caps with 3 exclamation points. I absolutely love listening to this podcast while working. It makes my shifts as a hotel housekeeper fly by. This is the most thorough A Song of Ice and Fire podcast I've found where the hosts can still manage to make me laugh. Simon and Mackelly do a wonderful job, specifically in that they give proper context and background to the events in each chapter, which is surely needed given the massive world that George Martin has built.
Well, thank you, Larissa. That's beautiful. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That's a really lovely review.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this one up. Brienne's meanderings have begun. When your best lead is that the family home of the man who disappeared the same night as your target was, past tense, and now ruined keep outside of Duskendale. So let's try there. You can't be feeling too awfully hopeful of finding her day one.
Yeah, and we all know where Sansa is. And unless she leaves the Eyrie, she's going to be hard to find for Brienne or most of anybody else looking for her.
Right. I mean, I don't know how closed off the Erie's going to remain. The Vale is going to remain now that Lysa Arryn is dead. But I can't imagine they're going to be too... Well, I mean, think about Peter Baelish. He's in charge up there now, and he wants to keep the fact that he's got Sansa under his wing secret, presumably.
Yes, and...
Because the day someone finds out that Peter Baelish is with Sansa Stark is the day that people say, you killed Joffrey Baratheon.
It very well might come down to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So he's going to keep this a secret as long as possible. So the last thing he's going to want is to welcome into the Vale these random spying hedge knights.
And even if they make it into the Vale, they have to get past the gates of the moon and then up the way castles all the way to the near top of the Giant's Lance to get to the Eyrie. That is a very selected group who get to make it that far. So she's going to be tough to find unless she's the one that moves locations.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And did you feel like Brienne showed a little bit of personality compared to her non-POV chapters here?
Give me examples of what you mean.
Okay, yeah, so I know, right? We're talking about Brienne. She's not exactly the life of the party, but she jokingly in her head mocks her Creighton for something like the desperate men that came by in the night, but not so desperate as to mess with Sir Creighton Longbow. And she thinks, oh no, not that desperate. And then she even conceals her laugh. And then she thinks to herself that she's happy to have these travel companions. Now, it's not exactly wearing her feelings on her sleeve here, but compared to her external non-POV chapters that she's in, where she's so serious and deadpan about everything, I felt like she was showing a little personality.
Yeah, you never know. You never know with people who are, straight-laced what's going on beneath that surface,
Yeah.
It would be funny if she was like constantly making like, bawdy jokes.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would have been such a surprise.
Yeah. Do we think it was a good idea for her to ride off alone in the night? I mean, generally speaking, to all listeners, that's not a great idea. But
Right.
Brienne in particular, it felt like she had companions here who had her back and who
Right.
were at least company for her, stop her going crazy.
Yeah, I know she's got a quest that she's all about, but it might have been useful to stick with the group for a while anyway.
Yeah. It seemed preemptive to leave them, I've got to say.
Plus, how often is she going to get a good night's sleep, She'd be
Right.
sleeping rough a lot by herself.
I mean, that bed was literally big enough for her.
Long, widthways anyway.
At least, I mean, yeah, but how many are going to be that wide? Yeah.
Right.
So next week we have another first-timer in Feast for Crows, but someone we've had POVs from not, relatively recently. Storm of Swords. We've had
Yes.
So, familiar face. That'll be the first returning POV, right?
I think so.
Feast for Crows, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
All right. Well, in the meantime, there's 4 ways that you could help us. You can, as Larissa did, leave us a positive review. Nothing helps spread the word better. You could buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. You could join us at any of the various sustainer levels, as Katura S did. There's a level to match any budget and interest. Or you could just make a donation directly at ghostsofharrenhal.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, keeping up on the latest Ghost of Harrenhal news and developments, check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.